would have to be living on an island more remote than Kame House to not have even heard of Dragon Ball Z by this point.
If you like cartoons and you love violence and camaraderie and comedy, then you would probably like Dragon Ball Z.
It has a lot to it. It has a story. It has fighting. It has everything that you would want to see, and it has something for everyone.
DBZ is awesome. They have tons of episodes, great characters. There's a reason it's such a huge fan base, and people talk about it, whether what they say good or negative.
It's just a big part of how, like, what I did when I was growing up.
I saw a lot of anime when I was in 8th grade because I lived there for a whole year. I was also born in Japan, but when I saw it in 8th grade, I was really amazed at how there are just these really cool storylines that were much deeper than what was in the US animation market at the time. And then years and years later, I never saw that it had come to the US markets yet, and I couldn't understand why. And so I have a very entrepreneurial spirit, and so I decided, hey, this is maybe a business opportunity. Let me at least look into it. Got my uncle, Nagafumi Hori, to set up some meetings. He happened to work for Toei in Japan, and so he was very helpful and instrumental in getting Funimation going. Because through those meetings, we were able to pick up Dragon Ball Z, because once I saw their catalog of several hundred titles, it's kind of obvious to me that that was clearly probably their best title that they had at the time. I met Daniel when I was working for IBM Boca Raton in it'd be the mid-'80s when I graduated from Purdue. And he had actually come out of Rice University's electrical engineering program, and we were on the same computer design team. In Boca, I became good friends back then, and then I had gone, a different path, and he had gone a different path after we both worked for IBM. And then when this idea for Dragon Ball Z came up, I was just talking to him about it, and his family got really interested in investing, and that's how it all came back together again with Daniel.
To me, Funimation and Dragon Ball Z go hand in hand.
Funimation has really put a name out there. They really pushed the anime scene forward and really helping with bringing out this whole different world that many people haven't really seen. And I don't think they could have done it without Dragon Ball Z.
It's the key property. Still to this day, it is our biggest property.
Gohan kept on training by putting a tailless T-Rex through its paces.
As a startup, you kind of sometimes take what you can get, in terms of, hey, if there's a good person here or there and they're not ready to move for a startup yet, you take what you can get if you want that person. And so in that situation, the money came from Dallas-Fort Worth through the Fukunaga family, the initial financing. But I was living in California at the time. It just seemed easier if we just started where we were, and then if the title, our first title, Dragon Ball, had any kind of success, then I would just move to, well, we weren't sure at the time. We were going to either consolidate in Hollywood or somewhere. Barry was from here, Dallas-Fort Worth, and the reason we used a studio up in Vancouver was that just through various connections, we knew there was a lot of good voice recording up there. That's how that started, because we didn't have our own studios back when we were a startup, of course. Bob was my wife's brother, and so it just happened that he was available right at that time, so we let him stay in Alabama where his family was. Now, of course, when the company started growing, he couldn't have these people all over the place, so we brought him. Instead of going to Hollywood, we decided we liked Texas better, and so we all decided to consolidate in Texas.
When I first watched it, I was kind of surprised at how in-depth it took so many of these characters, and the story just became so large.
I think it's just timeless, honestly.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it had a lot of action, a lot of adventure, and a lot of comedy, so something worth watching.
This one ought to do.
Well, at the very early stages, I had some input on, a little bit on casting, a little bit on what we were doing to record it, things like that. But honestly, a lot of creative was turned over to the other folks on the team because there were just so many other business things I had to run in the company that I couldn't just do creative work. And honestly, that's not necessarily where my biggest skills are. I'm a engineer, MBA type, a business type person, and not an artist. So I focused where my strengths were, and I had folks hired that focused on their strengths.
It's what jump-started anime in America, so it should always be something that everybody needs to see.
Well, oh, you're an audio engineer? Where do you work? It's like, I work at Funimation, and it's like, oh, well, what's that? And it's like, Dragon Ball Z? Oh, yeah, we did that. And that's the conversation, So everybody who works here has had that conversation a million times.
The characters are so, at the same time, simple but relatable.
Everyone has some kind of character that they can relate to and kind of almost put themselves into the show a bit.
I remember that once we had acquired Dragon Ball Z, but, it had a slightly slow start in the U.S. because we couldn't get that exposure, so we had to renegotiate our contract with Toei to not have to pay them so much upfront cash per episode because it wasn't recouping that cash at that time, of course. And for us to keep bringing more episodes over, we couldn't both spend all the costs in marketing it and dubbing it and all of this large fee up front to Toei. So we agreed to renegotiate the whole deal, and it took all day and all night, and we got a photo of us at 4:30 in the morning shaking hands with our executive when we finally got it done, and that's what closed the deal on Dragon Ball Z that got it to go forward.
Oh, yeah, it's very special. See, I made it myself. I'm going to have to stand up there, though, in order for it to work. It's very technical.
Some of the struggles were like when we cast Frieza and she was a woman, even though she was playing the main bad guy in that saga, and that was always an interesting question. Is like, it was this kind of divided camp. Some were like, wow, that voice is just so unique and odd and almost evil sound, sort of evil sounding and all that, and they liked to use that woman and make it feel a little unique, especially since Frieza was kind of small in stature. And then there's this camp of but it's a main bad guy, it's got to be a guy, and then the fans will find out it's a woman, voicing it, and it was one of those kind of odd debates, in the company. Honestly, I didn't really make the final call on that either. I kind of left it to the creative team to sort it out best they could.
I think part of its goofiness is its key aspect of joy for most fans.
And people don't even realize, but the initial pilot of the original Dragon Ball, it was renamed, Goku was named Zero. And so the original pilot was a semi-Americanized name, Zero, for Goku, and that was obviously changed back to Goku before we really went on TV.
Look out, fishy! Zero's coming!
Another interesting thing, of course, is that people don't realize that the original owners, of Dragon Ball, which is Toei and Shueisha, wanted us to make sure to start with Dragon Ball, just like it started in Japan and other parts of Asia, and then move on to Dragon Ball Z, and then move on to Dragon Ball GT. So they wanted it all in sequence like that. And well, there's 153 episodes of Dragon Ball, and the only problem was that we were obviously seeing in the U.S. market that Z was where all the it seemed like all the attention was from the audience, and so we had to beg to see if we could skip past after we did the first 13 episodes of Dragon Ball. We wanted to skip right into Z, and that was a really, really crucial point in the company, because if we hadn't been able to skip, that would have been a real problem probably for the whole franchise in the U.S. market. But fortunately, actually Bandai was a big part of this, helped convince Toei and Shueisha. They were smart enough to realize that, hey, these guys are supposed to be the experts in the U.S. market, so we don't necessarily have to follow the Japanese model, and they allowed us to skip. But that was quite a touchy point for a while there. Though what's really actually funny is within Funimation at that time, I would say 90% of the people thought the story and the charm of Dragon Ball was actually much better than Z. So actually, Dragon Ball was the favorite within the company, not Z. And so it's kind of funny, but Z just became popular because, though, it added action on top of the charm and humor that was high impact. And actually, if you really remember back in the 90s, there weren't many shows that were that high impact kind of title,
All right, if that's the way he wants it.
The battle between Vegeta and Goku in the first season, that was just, it was really intense.
My favorite battle in Dragon Ball Z, and this is not going to be anybody else's favorite, I guarantee it, is against Raditz. And the reason why is because this is the first time Goku actually loses. I watched Dragon Ball before I watched Dragon Ball Z, and Dragon Ball spends so much time showing how badass Goku is. He can never lose. Then Raditz comes down, and he beats him. It's like, wait a minute. Goku isn't the invincible guy we thought he was. He's dead now.
The battle with Frieza and his evolutionary forms, it was very intense, and it was just there was a lot of passion behind it.
I say the one when he first fought Frieza at the end, since that was the first time he turned into Super Saiyan.
The broadcast standards are so tight in the U.S. for when it comes to children's stuff that they had us do a lot of editing of the show, and even what we thought was innocent looking or the hell on the shirt was a no-no, obviously, for the U.S. audience. We had to change that. Painting on underwear and things like that had to be done. Even if just a little bit too much cleavage was showing, we had to paint up the shirt. That seems kind of minor, but you know, they're very strict on these standards, especially if they think you're trying to target a children's audience. Though, you know, again, this show is really not a kids' show in a sense. I mean, it's a crossover. Those are the biggest debates because honestly, we didn't want to edit the original creator's work as much as possible. We wanted to keep it back to the original creator.
Is that what I think it is?
Once we got it to start becoming popular, you see, our problem was that we had this decision: do we Americanize it to make sure that we feel it was going to be popular enough that the franchise would have a long life, or do we keep it dead on true to the Japanese version and risk that maybe the cultural differences would mess up its popularity level in the US and therefore kill the property? And back in the 90s, since nobody was watching anime back then, those differences stood out, significantly. Now, so many people and kids and everybody are used to a lot of the anime style and things they do in anime don't seem to bother anybody. But back then, it was so unique that was a tough decision on how much to Americans. So that's why when we went back to the DVDs, we said, even though it cost us a lot of money, we had said we were going to go back and try to do the original version and really get it back to how the Japanese creator had it, and so that we would make that version different than what was originally aired on television, so that the DVD buyer could get it as close to the original as possible. That's how we were trying to satisfy our fan base in that sense. But those are tough decisions because, if the title didn't work or had a hiccup on TV because it didn't reach a mass enough audience, then it could have died right there.
When I was first into it, I introduced it to more of my friends. And as I made more friends, they either knew about it already, and we, would watch it together, hang out.
I actually introduced Dragon Ball Z to my mom. She kind of liked it.
I was the first one in my family and my cousins to actually get into anime and DBZ. And a couple of my cousins, they had little kids, youngers, and I was babysitting. I'm like, hey guys, you guys want to see something? So I put Dragon Ball Z on. I got them hooked, and now they're in love with it because that was their very first thing that they saw as well, as far as anime goes.
Well, it's definitely a family-oriented show, I mean, it's all about family and family values and sticking together and teamwork and all that stuff, so why wouldn't you be able to show it to a kid, It's pretty directed at children anyway, so I know that when my daughter gets older and old enough to appreciate it, I'll definitely be showing it to her.
It starts with great content. I mean, it's just that the story is just so good. It's such a classic. It's unique in so many ways. The characters are just amazing, in that show. And it broke a lot of rules. I mean, when we introduced this show back in the 90s and we were showing it to TV networks, the common type of statement you'd get is, oh, well, you can't show something that's sophisticated because people won't understand it. And they said, and each episode needs to be its own story because nobody can follow such a complicated storyline that goes from show to show in a serialized fashion like that. And the Hollywood folks said, oh, well, your characters are changing during the series. They get older and things, it's like, if you have Roadrunner, he's Roadrunner always, forever, and our characters are actually growing up, and those were some of the innovations of what made this franchise so great. Just goes to show you that people, I guess, some of those gatekeepers, they can follow some of their rules, but the people voted. No, this series is really innovative in many ways and broke a lot of molds, and it was great.
My favorite character is Pen, because she's a little girl and she's awesome and she kicks butt. She can whip the guys' butts if she wanted to.
I think Gohan would have to be one of my personal favorite characters because he was the youngest one of the group, and I was a little kid myself when I started watching this, and I just found it easier to identify with a kid more than an adult at the time.
Well, as a kid, when I was watching it, my favorite character was Trunks, and it was because he had a sword, and I like swords.
It's changed several times. I would say that originally it was Trunks, and because, some guy said earlier because he has a sword, and I'm pretty sure that was the reason that I liked him too.
Vegeta's my favorite. Short, dark-haired, kind of snarky, a little bit of a jerk.
Goku, because he's the main character, and he's the strongest.
You gotta love Goku. I mean, he's a great character. But I like Vegeta as well from his edginess. I really love that shirt he wears, Bad Man. Such a classic. I mean, what can you say? The guy's wearing a pink shirt. Probably kick anybody's butt, but he's wearing a pink shirt that says "Bad Man" on it. It's great. It's just so many unique characters in that show. It's just a fun show. Who would have made a character like Boo as a bad guy? I mean, had you told the Hollywood types back in the '90s that we're going to make the main bad guy pink, they would have just thrown up all over you and said, "Are you crazy?"
Wow. When Goku was like this, he didn't recognize any of us.
Titles like that do well on TV often have a strong merchandise program, and we were fortunate that we had several good partners in that area as well, including Irwin Toy on the action figure and Atari on the video game. Were really fantastic partners for us, and they really helped propel the merchandise side of the business. A few of the top events that helped the franchise was, on the early stages, it was the faith that the Bandai and Pioneer had in the franchise to help support it from a toy and home video point of view. And then it went into syndication with several syndicators that helped the project along. And then in 1998 was probably the biggest breakthrough when Cartoon Network picked it up, though they were a much smaller network back then, but it was a really great relationship with them. The brand helped them, but they certainly helped us a lot, and that was a key turning point, was the network exposure on Cartoon Network. And then after that, it sort of life on its own, as in particular home video, we brought all that in-house to Funimation, and that's really been a good move for us as we've been able to really nurture the title through home video, especially through home video, actually. So.
Hey, hold on! I was just kidding about the whole dirtbag thing. Yeah. You really thought I was trying to hurt you, didn't you? That's funny. I was just messing around with you.
Watch it if you like action, if you like really serious characters and really comical characters.
It has a storyline to it. It has a lot where you want to relate to the characters, while also it keeps with that action scene and the comedy, the romance, the drama. It has a bit of everything.
If you like action and adventure.
Kamehameha!
Kamehameha!
Funimation!
season you should be watching.